Hello, my name is Leah. Welcome to my channel, Dirty Little Literate, where I like to talk about books that are disturbing, disgusting, weird, bizarre, etc., what have you. And the book I am talking about today is The Wasp Factory by Iain Banks. This is a very short book, and I will give you a trigger warning right off the bat because one of the few trigger warnings that I do actually remember to give on occasion is anything about animal cruelty. And I will say that is perhaps my chief complaint about this book. I would not have necessarily dove right in had I realized the extent to which that is a component of this story. I did enjoy this book, but I certainly could have done without that piece, and yet at the same time it is such a big component that I don't know how much of the book would be left without it. So this book centers around our main character, Frank, who is a 17-year-old boy living in Scotland with his father, who is a single dad. And Frank also has a brother, an older brother who, in the very start of the book, we find out has escaped from a mental institution. Right off the bat, we're already given the sense that, Frank seems like a pretty lucky dude that he too is not in a mental institution. For his brother to be in a mental institution and for Frank not to be, you're kind of wondering how unstable his brother is, because Frank does not seem particularly well, if you ask me. The first chapter starts with him saying that he was working on what he is calling sacrifice poles when he finds out that his brother has escaped from the mental institution. So what are sacrifice poles? They are these giant poles sprouting up from the ground that he has placed and has attached dead animals to the top of these poles. And in his mind, there's some sort of offering. Frank is a very ritualistic guy, and it just so happens that many of his rituals / do all of his rituals, I would say 90% of his rituals center around unfortunate things happening to animals. So he's saying, he's just working on his little sacrifice poles. He finds this out. He's like, but I already knew that was going to happen because the factory told me. So as you're reading this book, in the beginning, well, throughout the whole book, but especially in the beginning, he's mentioning the factory. So you're thinking that there's going to be a very clear introduction into the factory at any point. And I will say it is elaborated on more, as the story goes along. But I don't think he ever went as in depth into it as I was expecting for it to be called the Wasp Factory. Obviously, we're assuming the factory's got to do with wasps because the book title isn't gonna just lie to us like that. It does seem that wasps are very frequently on Frank's mind. One strange thing that he does, he will get, the old school little bedside alarm clocks where they have the two metal prongs that are sticking out kind of like in a V, and then there's the little piece in the center that hits both of the metal pieces. It goes back and forth and it hits the metal pieces, and that's what makes the noise and that's what wakes you up. So he ties live wasps to each of these little metal poles so that when the thingamabob is hitting back and forth on the metal poles, it's smashing into the wasps. So Frank do be torturing creatures. So Frank and his dad, they're living on this remote part of this island where they can leave the island and go into town, but where they live is kind of it's separate. They're not really getting too much company. So Frank really kind of has free reign to do whatever the fuck he wants. And his dad does not seem to be bothered by him torturing animals. Honestly, I don't really want to give you all the gory details of everything he's doing to animals. But one thing that I do want to note is that as all of it is happening, he does seem really hyped to explain the logistics behind all of these weapons that he makes. He's really into weapons. And He will definitely describe the animal torture in quite a bit of detail, but he never specifically says anything like, oh, I love to see them suffer, or like, oh, I love to see the life drain from their eyes. And I will say, generally, when I read books that are supposed to be about psychopaths, like especially violent psychopaths, they usually have that as part of like the character's kind of inner monologue. And with Frank, it's really not like that. He just is describing to you what happens. And of course, we're assuming that he likes it because he's doing it all the time, but he's not like, I just love to kill things. It's more like, I kill things. That's like the vibe that we're getting. Okay, I 100% just had to switch the lighting situation that I had going on. I had some purple light going on, and for whatever reason, it was making something crazy happen with my teeth where it looked like I had purple braces on. So that has been amended. Getting back to Frank being on the island with his dad, he kind of has free reign to do whatever he wants. Another thing we find out is back in the day, Frank's dad was kind of a hippie and also very like anti-authority. So when Frank's mom gave birth to him, it was a home birth, and they decided not to get him a birth certificate. He's not like registered anywhere. He doesn't have a social security number, nothing to that effect. So technically he doesn't exist. And I guess his dad and his brother like would always tell people that he's like a cousin, just kind of hanging out in town every so often. So also he's never had to be in the public education system. So he hasn't really been immersed in like day-to-day society filled with like normal interactions with other people. So I'm sure that doesn't kind of help his, sort of antisocial personality. Other signs of his psychopathy, sometimes he'll just kind of wonder about, like, would I care if my dad died? Like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm curious about him dying just because, like, wonder what that's like. I don't know. And I will say his dad is a very strange character. He so fucking weird. He, I guess, will get really hyped on some sort of absurd, outlandish theory that he's created that he will submit to publications all the time because he's like, he almost just wants to rile people up with his like weird theories, and he'll just send his like manuscripts for certain things over and over and over again, no matter how many times he gets denied. And it's like he kind of loves getting his manuscripts denied so he can just like be like like, make all these throat clearing noises about how crazy it is that he keeps getting denied. So like one of his theories has to do with like his ability to detect what type of alcohol someone has been drinking by the smell of their farts. And he does this with Frank all the time. And it's strange because apparently he does it with quite a bit of accuracy. I will say Frank also does seem to be a burgeoning alcoholic. He is only 17, but it doesn't seem like he has any problem getting alcohol at the bars. As I mentioned, this is in Scotland, so I'm not quite sure of the drinking age, but I assume that it is probably younger than in America. And so he has really been getting schmammered when he goes out to the bars, like, to the point where he's just kind of puking in public and always returns home absolutely sloppy. Like you can just tell he's probably one of those people that like is like stabbing his key into the door everywhere other than like inside of the lock. He's like that type of drunk. Now I want to tell you a bit about what's going on with Frank's brother. So Frank's brother, Eric, he is terrifying. He apparently, growing up, was a very normal young lad, and Frank always really looked up to him, and he was actually going to be a doctor. He was in medical school, he was really well liked, he was really smart, he was so nice to his younger brother, yada yada. And it is alluded to that something momentous and pivotal happened and everything about him changed, and we don't get to find out what it is at first. What we do get to find out is apparently before he was put into a mental institution, everyone was terrified of this man and he got a horrible reputation. And I think this was like, he was probably like very early 20s. He was known for torturing and murdering people's dogs, which, the extent to which he's doing that and the extent to which it is described, don't make me read that. I read it. I want to unread it. Beyond that, he was also like trying to force children in the town to like eat worms. He's just a crazy man. So throughout the story, it's clear that Frank's dad is scared of his son Eric. And when he finds out that he's escaped, he's really scared because he does not want Eric to come home. Now, Frank does not seem to be on the same page as his dad. He would love to see his bro. And it's clear that Eric would like to see him as well because he starts calling the house. And Frank doesn't want his dad to know that Eric has been calling the house, so he'll always pretend he's talking to his friend, which he only has one friend. But Eric is calling the house, and Eric is very clearly so unhinged. I don't know if I can properly articulate the extent to which he does not seem in touch with reality, but like, for example, Frank will be saying like, oh yeah, so-and-so, like he'll say his friend's name. His friend's name is Jamie. Like, oh yeah, Jamie, good to hear from you, because he's really trying to put on a show so his dad will think he's talking to his friend. And Eric will be freaking out like, why would you call me that? You don't know my name? You don't know who I am? Like he's taking it so serious and like not catching on. And Frank will be like, when are you coming here? And he's like, I already am here, meaning that for him, his version of here is wherever he is, and Frank is there, not here. Like he just, the way he like interprets things, like is a very literal interpretation, and you will often hear noises of animals being tortured, like while he's on the phone. And what's interesting is despite the fact that Frank does torture animals, it really does seem like he doesn't like that his brother tortures dogs. So I don't really know where the line lies, but he is like actively trying to convince his brother like, no more dogs, okay? And perhaps it is just because he doesn't want people's attention to be drawn to the fact that, you know, Eric might be in certain locations based on wherever dogs are going missing, things like that. It's also alluded to that he has been eating the dog meat. And so he's just surviving, eating dog, and he's saying he doesn't sleep because, like, who needs to do that? That's like a thing you would only do if you're brainwashed. That's where he's at. Despite the fact that Frank and Eric are in communication, Eric does not seem to want to give Frank any details about where he is or when he might show up, but it's very strongly implied that he's gonna be there at some point, and we don't really know what he's gonna do, and Frank really does not seem too concerned about the possibility that his brother could be violent with them, and there's nothing to suggest that he wouldn't be. He really does not sound like you could rely on him to be in a mentally stable place where, you know, he's not a threat to other people. So, getting back to Frank's own unhingedness, we find out, and this is actually on the book jacket, he's like, you know, I did go through this phase where I was murdering people, but that was when I was a child, you know, it was just a phase. Which, wow. And he was really doing the damn thing at a very young age. I can't remember exactly how old he was at the time of the very first murder, but I want to say like it was somewhere between like 5 and 7 or something, like extremely young. Throughout the book, he does retell these stories of how he murdered these various people. His first victim was his cousin, and you know, his cousin was just kind of a dick. We don't really like him that much. Apparently, his cousin at one point was in a severe accident where he lost his leg, and he lost it kind of like right above the kneecap. And so he has this fake leg, and if you're kind of picturing how this would work, so you have the bottom of the leg and it's sitting in this sort of hollowed out, I don't want to call it a cup, but it's like a hollowed out space where the bottom of your leg fits into it, and so it's like kind of resting in there, and then you have the fake leg. His cousin is napping one day, and I guess he doesn't have his fake leg attached. It's like next to him while he's napping. And Frank takes the fake leg that has this little, you know, hollowed out area for him to put the top of his leg in, and he puts a venomous snake in there. and then just like sets it back. And when his cousin wakes up and puts on his leg, the snake starts biting the shit out of him, and he is hit with that snake venom and he dies. Obviously, no one is gonna suspect Frank of anything. He is so young, and like this really just does seem like something that would be such an accident. And he really is so good at pretending to be like traumatized by the whole experience. So Frank's second murder takes place when he was 8. So I think, yeah, he was significantly younger than that for his first murder. So the second murder, he's 8. He murders his younger brother, Paul, who is only 5 years old. And it's so interesting because he's like, yeah, oh no, I had nothing against Paul. Like, I always thought he was really sweet, but you know, I always just knew he had to go. And you're like, what the fuck, why? It almost seems like he has this sort of like philosophical viewpoint as to why certain people need to be killed, and it really isn't related to them being bad people or even disliking them. Although with his first murder with his cousin, I don't think he really liked him. But anyway, so I guess him and Paul were quite close, and one day they were both walking on the beach. And they actually come across something that he recognizes is like a bomb from a previous war, which I don't know. I guess to me, this just seems so strange. Like, I don't ever envision stumbling upon a bomb just like chilling on the beach. But who am I other than a gal who just hasn't knowingly encountered a bomb? But anyways, he recognizes what this is because he's really into weapons, but his brother does not. And so he tells his brother he wants to play a game, and he wants his brother to hit the bomb. He's not calling it a bomb, obviously. Hit it as hard as he can. I think he gets him like a baseball bat or a stick or something. And Frank tells him, you need to wait. I'm going to go run up on that hill, and I want to be able to see you from this viewpoint. So you really are not allowed to hit it until I'm up there. And I think at first when he hits it, like he's just not hitting it that hard. So like Frank's kind of encouraging him to keep going. And then his brother blows up. His brother blows up. So he has just killed his second victim. And again, I mean, he does say at some point, like maybe around this time, he's like, maybe some people started suspecting me. But at the same time, it's like, obviously they know this child did not place the bomb there. So again, it just seems like this crazy accident type of situation. So Frank's next murder is yet another one of his cousins. And this cousin, she is very, very young. Her name is Esmeralda. And his view on this is so interesting. He's like, well, at this point I had taken out 2 males. So I already had kind of done women like a statistical favor. So I kind of had to even the balance. And I just had to kill a gal. And I really liked Esmeralda, but just gotta do what you gotta do. He is near the beach with Esmeralda one day, and I guess he had a phase where he was really into kites and flying kites and making kites and all of these things. And he finds a way, honestly, it's kind of hard for me to describe it exactly, but basically he finds a way to where, he's having her kind of hold the kite with him, but he maneuvers it in a way so that she's kind of like tangled to it and kind of trapped with this kite. And I guess the wind is really heavy. And honestly, it's so hard for me to fathom that this could actually work. She takes off into the air with the kite. She flies into the sky with the kite, perhaps into the ocean. Maybe she falls into the ocean. We don't know. Nobody ever finds her remains. She just floats off into the air, and that's that. And he's really smart. So rather than even going to like tell people what happened, he really practices like how traumatized he's gonna be many hours later after she dies. Like they find him and he seems like catatonic and so traumatized, like that he cannot even say the words about what happened. Over time, he's able to get out these bits and pieces that kind of allude to what happened, but he's not just like over eager to, give them all the details. But at this point, he has killed 3 of his family members. His extended family definitely is thinking, okay, if he's not doing this, like he's cursed, he's bad luck. Frank faces no consequences. Ultimately, it's like he just, I don't know, felt like he was balancing the scales by murdering these kids and never felt like he needed to murder anyone else after this, I guess. I do want to give you a little bit of a backstory about Frank as well, because there is something else that's alluded to throughout the beginning of the book where you know you're going to get more information, but it takes a while for you to get there. He seems to talk about, like, when he has to go to the bathroom, it sounds like maybe there's some sort of issue that's going on there. Maybe he has a disability or something to that effect. And then eventually we are told that when he was a toddler, this is so, ugh. Okay, so his mom, who's not in the picture, is such a crazy situation. So like she would show up, give birth to one of the dad's babies, and they'd be like, okay, have fun taking care of the baby later, and just like leave. And so she showed up to have the youngest brother. Frank is a toddler at this point. And so his dad is preoccupied because they're doing another home birth. And so he's trying to be there for the mom. I guess they had a dog, and Frank was with the dog in the backyard, and nobody's sure exactly why it happened, but the dog went to attack Frank, and I guess he bit off Frank's little toddler penis. So I guess, you know, his genitals were mutilated, and so it sounds like he basically doesn't have that. And so, yeah, I don't know bathroom situation wise what the exact logistics of that are. It seems like he's really trying to fulfill this like stereotype of like a traditional masculine man, because he does feel emasculated by the fact that he no longer has a penis. And he also seems to really hate women. He thinks that they are kind of worthless, like other than giving kids. They kind of have no purpose, they're weak, they suck, blah, blah, blah. So he's definitely going on his little misogynistic rants here and there throughout the book. As the story continues, again, we're like kind of getting phone calls from the brother. That seems to be on the forefront of his mind, but it seems like a lot of the story, we're getting more and more information about things that he's alluded to. Like, so for example, you know, he's alluding to something going on physically with him, and then we find out about the whole backstory with the dog. You know, he's alluding to being a murderer, and then throughout the story, we're kind of hearing about these past experiences with the murders of his, you know, various family members that he's killed. And one thing that I didn't love about this book, even though I really did actually like it, as I was reading it, it felt like there was a lot of what I don't think is necessarily meant to be filler. It seemed like the author really liked to include it, but like so many logistics about weaponry or the logistics of like the geography of the island, and it just seemed really excessive and like went into way more detail than what felt necessary to me. But maybe just because like I don't care about weaponry that much and I'm just bad with geography, so like a lot of the time it doesn't matter how you're describing the landscape. I've already decided in my mind how I'm picturing it, and what you tell me, I guess, apparently is kind of irrelevant. So it did feel like that does take up a lot of the book. So, you know, I will just note that, didn't love that component. So to get a little bit more into Frank's rituals and the whole Wasp Factory thing, so he actually has hung on to, I guess, what you could call trophies or souvenirs from all of the murders. He also has kept the skull of the dog that bit off his penis, but he has like a different little souvenir from each of his murders. Frank has a space, I want to say it's the attic. He has somewhere in the house where his dad can't get to it because his dad has an issue with walking. He like limps, and it's like physically painful for him to get to this part of the house. So Frank has some privacy in this area. He has all these like trophies and souvenirs and kind of this weird altar going. He has these certain phrases that he recites, and he feels like he has to say them multiple times. And a lot of these phrases have to do with like confessing about his certain murders. But to me, it does kind of give a little bit of that like obsessive compulsive disorder type of energy. Like he thinks he has to kind of do these rituals and say these phrases for things to happen or to not happen. And we end up finally finding out specifically what the Wasp Factory is. So he has this old antique clock. It's very large. He has it structured in a way where at each number around the clock, there is a different method of potential wasp murder. He puts a wasp under the glass part of the clock, so it's kind of trapped in between the face of the clock and that glass. And so he puts a wasp in, and the wasp is going to crawl around, and eventually it enters into one of the spots that's a different wasp murder opportunity, I guess. And so they're like weird things, okay? So like maybe they'll have to drown in Frank's urine or like be incinerated. The reason he does this is because he thinks it has some sort of premonition type value in predicting the future or giving him some sort of clue or hint as to something that's about to happen. So for example, if a wasp is incinerated, it's like, oh, something's about to happen with fire or whatever. So he really takes this to heart. So he feels like he's being given all these messages. He really believes this. He puts all his stock in the factory. So he'll believe that things are or are not going to be okay based on whatever this wasp got into. And I also just want to like note, I think this was more with the sacrifice poles. He has some rituals with this too. And he collects a lot of disgusting things from his body to like incorporate into his rituals, including boogers, spit, urine, toenail jam. Is that what he calls it? Like toenail junk, like the gooey gunk under his toenails. He mixes it all together and like rubs it on stuff. Like that's part of his ritual. Okay, yeah, that one really gets me. So Frank is just doing the most. At one point, he's doing his whole Wasp Factory, what's gonna happen kind of situation, and he finds out that something is gonna happen with fire, and he's pretty nervous. Like he thinks something bad is about to happen, and he's worried for his brother. He thinks it's somehow gonna be connected to his brother. One thing I do want to mention, so I mentioned that Frank has a certain area of the house where like his dad really doesn't get up in there. In addition to that, throughout the book, it is also mentioned that there is a certain room that is like his dad's office in the house that is always locked, and Frank has never been allowed to go inside, and his dad is like very kind of neurotic about keeping the key on him at all times, so Frank would never be allowed to get in there. So where we're at in the story, Eric, his brother, has been continuing to make calls, and it sounds like he's very close. Frank has started like hearing the noises of dogs in pain, and he actually ends up seeing a bunch of animals, like sheep that have been like set on fire, and they're running towards the house. Like, so he knows that Eric is nearby. Meanwhile, his dad went and got really drunk at the bar and called him and said, hey, they caught your brother. But he's like, I know they didn't catch my brother. Like, I see that he like must be setting animals on fire right now. His dad realizes that Eric was going to be there soon. He's trying to get Frank to come and pick him up so Frank will be out of the house, so Frank will not interact with Eric. Now, Frank is pretty pissed at his dad about this. So he's like, not liking that he is preventing this little reunion with his brother. So he does not go to pick up his dad like he said he would. And his dad ends up coming home, and he's super, super plastered. And so at one point, Frank realizes, oh shit, I think, because I guess his dad normally hardly ever drinks like this. So he realizes like, oh, he does not have his faculties about him. I think I can get his key off of him, and I think I can go into his office. That's something he's always wanted to do. He always tries the door just in case, like maybe his dad forgot. So he goes into his dad's office while his dad is passed out drunk. So Frank is able to get into his dad's office, and one of the first things he sees is a jar filled with liquid, and inside of it looks like the genitals of a little toddler. So it appears that his dad kept his genitals in a jar after the dog bit them off, which is just a crazy thing to do, and I'm not quite sure what the justification for that would be. And he's like, okay, that's really weird, but he feels like there's got to be more, so he's continuing to look around. And then he notices a couple strange things that he's not expecting to find. He finds hormones, like the type of hormones you would be taking, perhaps, like if you were going through a gender transition. And he also finds like a box of tampons. And remember, his mom does not live with them. She's never there. So it's just him and his dad. So he's like, why the fuck does my dad have tampons and hormones? And so he's coming to this realization where like, he's like, oh my gosh, is my dad, like, was he born a woman? And keep in mind, again, he hates women. And so obviously he's also, you know, very like transphobic as well. So his wheels start spinning. And all of the sudden, there are all these things that start clicking because I guess his dad doesn't have that much in the way of like arm hair. And when he was young, his dad used to let his older brother like dress up in dresses. And like when he was younger, he thought like, oh, my dad's just a hippie and is trying to like, you know, break the gender norms or just any norms, to be quite honest. So he hadn't thought that much of it. But now he's like, was he letting him do that because he was doing that himself? And he's thinking, wait, this has been my mom the whole time, and that's why like my mom was never around. Like I only saw my mom when she was like giving birth. So maybe that's when he was like, you know, still presenting as a woman, like in woman's clothes and stuff like that. But like this all happened kind of when he was a toddler. Like he never like really saw his mom much growing up. So he's thinking, oh my gosh, is my dad actually my mom? And so like he's just having all of these like crazy, like, I don't know, fireworks going off in his brain. And because of how transphobic he is like enraged, potentially about to become violent. So he goes to his dad, who's like passed out drunk, and he wakes him up and he has a knife and he's like holding it up to his dad's throat and like, you know, showed him the tampons and the hormones. He's like, what is this? What is this? Whatever. And his dad's like, oh, he's too drunk for this shit right now. Frank goes and starts pulling his dad's pants off so he can verify what's going on. And he is quite surprised to find that his dad has male genitalia. And I will say this book, I believe, was written back in the 80s. So like, I think gender reassignment surgery, like it definitely wasn't done as commonly. Let's say he had the surgery, like why does he still have tampons? You know what I mean? So Frank is so confused. He's like, bro, you need to explain this to me. His dad's like trying to apologize and it's just getting so chaotic. So he's wanting answers from his dad. But as all of this is happening, suddenly, guess who's here? It's his brother, Eric. And so he's not going to get answers right now. And it becomes apparent that Eric is trying to set the house on fire. I guess the dad, like, I swear, they're all kind of into, like, their weapons and whatever. And I guess he has a stockpile of stuff that, like, could very easily be quite explosive in the basement. And Eric knows that. And he is trying to have all that combust to set the house on fire. I think he also has, like, an axe. There's a lot of shit that's about to go down. I do want to let you know that we do get some information on what kind of led to Eric's downfall, where he kind of just lost his shit. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, I was kind of surprised that we're viewing this as the thing that like completely changed everything. I don't know, I have a hard time believing that this incident can cause someone to go from like how he was being described before to how he is being described now. I think he has very severe mental illness. I do not think it's just trauma, you know what I mean? Like, so basically we find out that when Eric was working to become a doctor while he was in medical school, one of the things he was doing, he was volunteering in, it was like a NICU, but it was for babies who were definitely like not gonna make it long term, and they were like hooked up to all this stuff. It wasn't usually like a temporary thing and then they're gonna get better. It was like kind of just, we're just keeping them alive, but that probably won't happen for much longer. Like it was a really kind of traumatizing atmosphere. But anyway, I guess there was one baby where I can't remember what the condition is called, but like your skull is not fully enclosed around your brain. Like you have to have this like, I don't know, kind of contraption around it to like protect everything. But this baby was really messed up, and so he would go and he was always like checking on the babies, making sure everyone's okay. And then one day he notices this particular baby seems like he's like smiling, and he has never seen this baby smile, and he's kind of confused. He's looking at this baby and it's not moving, and it's just kind of stuck with this smile, and there's just something that's not feeling right about it. So he's like going to check him out, and he looks, and on the back of his head, so like because his skull's like not enclosed, you can see his brain, and there are a bunch of maggots eating his brain. Like the neglect in this hospital, this baby had died from maggots eating his brain. And so for Eric to have seen this, he like kind of went into like hysterics and like a catatonic state, and like all of that, totally understandable. But the extent to which he changed after this, like to be such a sensitive person to then like setting dogs on fire and trying to feed kids worms. I know that a lot of the time schizophrenia can come on in your like early 20s, and he was around that age. So I kind of think it was that, and maybe this was just kind of like a triggering factor. He was already, I think, gonna have this. That's just, you know, what do I know? But like, I don't think it's just that. I think there's a lot of different stuff going on. So that's kind of the backstory there with him. Okay, back to present moment. So Eric does have an axe, and he's trying to set everything on fire, whatever. Frank has a little like catapult slingshotty type of thing that he uses to catapult these like, I think like steel balls or whatever at animals normally. And he's able to do this like at Eric, and Eric ends up running off. They are able to make sure that the fire like doesn't spread. Everything's fine. But now we come to the point where Eric's gone, so now it's just him and his dad, and he's like, okay, you need to tell me what the fuck is going on. Now, this is when we find out, God, okay, Frank's dad is fucked. Apparently, because he had had such negative experiences with women, including Frank's mom. I think Eric and Frank have different mothers, but he's just had negative experiences with women in general. Apparently, when Frank was a toddler, he was attacked by a dog, and his genital area was mutilated a little bit by this dog. But Frank was born a female, and apparently his dad thought he could use this opportunity as an experiment and be like, oh yeah, I guess your genitals were bitten off, but like, let's just pretend he's a boy. And I guess he had kind of like experimented a little bit with the older brother in terms of like having him wear female clothes and kind of just like sort of normalizing these things. So like if, you know, Frank had been wearing dresses when he was younger, he's not viewing that as like, oh, I was a girl and now I'm a boy. And so because he was so young, he doesn't remember this. And so his dad just decided to, you know, secretly be giving him hormones, and he created fake toddler genitals to put in a jar just in case Frank ever got suspicious. So I guess he was raising him as a boy even though he was born a girl. So I guess because everything looked a little mangled down there anyway, it was not like blatantly obvious to him that he was a girl. And now he's been like, you know, really leaning into this toxic masculinity thing, and now he's like wondering if deep down that's because, I don't know, he knew something was different and he had to like overcompensate or what. But anyways, he finds out like, yeah, his whole life has been a lie. His dad's been lying to him his whole life. And now this dude who absolutely fucking hates women finds out that he was born a woman. Mic drop. And I think that this twist was kind of wild because honestly, I just like, before he went into his dad's study, this was not something that like was even remotely on my radar. And I didn't really know that this was going to be a story with like some sort of hop and twist. So this was definitely unexpected for sure. So he kind of speculates a bit at like, because he had always felt emasculated because, you know, his genitals were removed, that he was going to take away from everyone else because that was taken away from him. So he was taking away lives, blah, 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 shma, ma, ma. And ultimately the book ends because he's like talking about his brother, and he's like, yeah, he came home to find his brother, and lo and behold, you know, he's gonna end up finding out he's got a sister. So woof, 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 woof. I will say there's definitely a lot more in this book in terms of like his kind of rationale for like why he murdered, and just some of the stuff he does that honestly did seem kind of, I don't know, just sort of a little out of touch with reality, that like it's like hard to even summarize or articulate to you. I think you just need to read it. But it makes sense given how, you know, his brother also is not very in touch with reality. And clearly his dad is a fucking weirdo that's just like, you know what, I would just prefer to have a son, so let me just pretend I have a son. Like, just fucking crazy. So it, you know, it makes sense that the kids are not doing well. They're fucked up. This family's a hot mess. So again, you know, I did like this book. I need a break from books that have shit going on with animals. I think the Wasp Factory component, strange. I don't know. I feel like it was explained kind of late in the book for it to be called the Wasp Factory. I don't know. This book, I have like conflicting feelings. There were certain components that I didn't really like, but ultimately I enjoyed the ride of reading the book. If you've read this one, what did you think? Tell me. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next time.